Module 3. Part 2. Classroom Management. Unit 29 to 32. Unit 29. Teacher Roles. What are teacher roles? During a lesson, the teacher needs to manage the activities and the learners in the classroom in different ways. This means he or she needs to behave in different ways at different stages of the lesson. These different kinds of behavior are called teacher roles. This is called monitoring. When we present new language to the class, our role is to inform and explain to our learners. Here are some roles teachers often use. Role 1. Planner. The teacher prepares and thinks through the lesson in detail before teaching it so that it has variety and there are appropriate activities for the different learners in the class. 2. Informer. Gives the learners detailed information about the language or about an activity. 4. Manager. Organizes the learning space, makes sure everything in the classroom is running smoothly, and sets up rules and routines, i.e., things which are done regularly, for behavior. Monitor. Goes around the class during individual, pair, and group work activities, checking learning. Involver. Makes sure all the learners are taking part in the activities. Parent/friend. Comforts learners when they are upset or unhappy. Diagnostician. Is able to recognize the cause of learners' difficulties. Resource. Can be used by the learners for help and advice. What are teacher roles? During a lesson, the teacher needs to manage the activities and the learners in the classroom in different ways. This means he or she needs to behave in different ways at different stages of the lesson. These different kinds of behavior are called teacher roles. Unit 30. Grouping students. How do we group students? Grouping students is using different ways to organize our students when they are working in the classroom. We usually organize them to work in different ways during each lesson. The groupings we choose depend on the type of activity, the students, and the aim of the activity. There are two different ways in which the teacher can group students in the classroom. The first is when she chooses particular interaction patterns for the students, i.e., ways in which students work together and with the teacher in class. They include open class, group work, pair work, and individual work, and the teacher to students and students to teacher. Increase the learner's self-confidence about language learning, for example, help learners feel they can be good at learning the language. Make the language classes interesting. Promote learner autonomy. Personalize the learning process, for example, make the course feel relevant to the learners' lives. 9. Increase the learner's awareness of their goals, for example, what they want to achieve. 10. Familiarize learners with the target language culture. Unit 31. Correcting learners. How do we correct learners? When we correct learners, we show them that something is wrong and that they have made a mistake. We correct these mistakes in different ways. We use oral correction techniques to correct oral mistakes and written correction techniques to correct written mistakes. We also use different techniques when we correct different kinds of mistakes, example, errors or slips. Oral correction. Here are some ways that we can correct oral mistakes. 1. Drawing a timeline on the board. Timelines show learners the relationship between the use of a verb tense and time. 2. Finger correction. This shows learners where they have made a mistake. We show one hand to the class and point to each finger in turn as we say each word in the sentence. 3. Gestures and/or facial expressions are useful when we do not want to interrupt learners too much, but still want to show them that they have made a slip. 4. Phonemic symbols. Pointing to phonemic symbols is helpful when learners make pronunciation mistakes, for example using a long vowel U when they should have used a short one U, or when they mispronounce a consonant. 5. Echo correcting means repeating. Repeating what a learner says with rising intonation will show the learner that there is a mistake somewhere. 6. Identifying the mistake. Sometimes we need to identify the mistake by focusing learners' attention on it and telling them that there is a problem. 7. Not correcting at the time when the mistake is made. We can use this technique to give feedback after a fluency activity, for example. At the end of the activity, we can say the mistakes or write them on the board and ask learners what the problems are. Written correction. Other techniques for making written corrections are: 1. Teacher correction. The teacher corrects the learner's mistakes by writing the correct words, instead of symbols from a correction code. 2. Peer correction. The learners look at each other's work and correct it or discuss possible corrections. 3. Self-correction. The learners, usually with the help of a guidance sheet, look for and correct mistakes in their own work. 4. Ignoring the mistake. Sometimes we choose to ignore mistakes that learners make. Unit 32. Giving feedback. How do we give feedback? Giving feedback is giving information to learners about their learning. Feedback can focus on learners' language or skills, the ideas in their work, their behavior, their attitude to learning, or their progress. Sometimes we give feedback to the whole class, at other times we give feedback to small groups or individual learners. The purposes of feedback are to motivate learners and to help them understand what their problems are and how they can improve. Feedback can be linked to formal or informal assessment and can be given to learners in the classroom or during individual meetings. We can also write regular feedback in the form of comments, grades, or marks on a learner's record sheet. The learner can keep this sheet in their portfolio, or we might keep it with our records of their overall progress and achievement. Key concepts and the language teaching classroom feedback should be positive. We should tell learners what is good, what they are doing well, what they need to do to improve, and how. This is particularly important for weaker or less confident learners. We can give feedback in the classroom during an activity, while we are monitoring learners doing pair work or group work, or at the end of or after the lesson. During feedback, we can revisit or recycle language that learners are having problems with. It is useful to give learners written or oral feedback after assessment in addition to giving them a score, to provide encouragement and guidance for how to improve. See Units 17 and 21 for assessment.